My friends, what I'm about to share with you is a story I never imagined I would tell, maybe the heaviest burden of my life. Even as I sit here, putting it into words, my chest tightens, my hands tremble. I know full well that once you hear it, many of you will say, "How could you?" Or, "This is unimaginable in a family." And I won't blame you, because honestly, if someone had told me years ago that I would end up caught in something like this, I would have laughed in their face. I'm over 50 now, an age when a man is supposed to be wise, steady, the anchor for his children. I always thought of myself as a responsible man, a husband who had once been devoted, a father who sacrificed everything. My wife passed away far too young, leaving me to raise our only son alone. From that moment on, I lived both as mother and father. I never remarried. I told myself my life had only one purpose left: to raise my boy into a good man. And he did grow up well. He studied hard, he worked responsibly, and eventually, he found someone to marry. The day he brought her home, my daughter-in-law, I felt joy and relief wash over me. At last, I thought, our house would have a woman's warmth again. She was petite, soft-spoken, with bright eyes that always seemed to carry respect. The first time I met her, something stirred inside me, something I buried so quickly it felt like a reflex. I reminded myself, she's your son's wife. Don't you dare think of her any other way. Life went on. The three of us settled into a routine. I helped the young couple when they struggled money, fixing up the house, errands, whatever I could. She, my daughter-in-law, was gentle and thoughtful. She looked after my son, but also looked after me sometimes in ways even more attentive than my own boy. I would often lie awake at night, grateful to God for sending her to our family. But over time, that gratitude twisted into something else. There were moments, small, almost invisible at first, that unsettled me. The way she would laugh softly at my jokes, the way her hand lingered a second too long when she passed me a bowl, the way her eyes met mine, not as a daughter looks at a father-in-law, but as a woman looks at a man. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. I blamed my loneliness, my age, my foolish heart. I thought, "You're just starved for affection, old man. Don't be ridiculous." But the more I tried to ignore it, the more obvious it became. One evening, she brought me a glass of cold water while I was sitting on the porch. "Here, Dad," she said. "You've been out here too long." Her voice was tender in a way that pierced me. For a split second, she wasn't my daughter-in-law. She was simply a woman whose presence made my heart pound in my chest. I scolded myself afterward, ashamed. But I couldn't shake the memory of her eyes. There was something in them, something too warm, too deep. And it wasn't just once. It kept happening. When I caught the flu, she was the one who nursed me day and night, spooning me porridge, pressing a cloth to my forehead. My son was busy at work, hardly home. It was she who sat by my bedside, and when her soft hand brushed against my skin, I shivered, not from the fever, but from something else entirely. Another night, a storm knocked the power out. The house fell into darkness. She came to sit beside me, her hand brushing mine. I thought it was an accident, but she didn't pull away. She let it rest there, warm and steady. My heart stopped. Something had changed between us. Something invisible, but undeniable. Since then, I've lived in a storm of emotions: gratitude, guilt, fear, longing. I know what you must be thinking. He's the elder, the father-in-law. He should have put a stop to it. And you're right. But let me confess, there are moments in life when you're not as strong as you thought you were. Moments when a kind word, a gentle hand, a single gaze can unravel decades of self-control. Before I go on, let me tell you more about myself, so you understand how a man like me ended up here. I was born in a rural town. I worked the fields most of my life. When my wife died in my early 30s, I was still young, but I buried all thoughts of finding another partner. People said I was cold, hard, distant, but the truth was, I poured all my warmth into my son and left nothing for myself. By the time he grew up and married, I thought my duty was complete. I imagined living quietly, helping with grandchildren, watching my boy's family flourish. I thought the rest of my days would pass in peace, but life isn't so kind. What began as small gestures, a smile, a hand on the shoulder, a glass of water on a hot afternoon, slowly pulled me toward something forbidden. And before I knew it, I realized my daughter-in-law didn't just see me as her husband's father. I don't tell you this story to excuse myself. I don't ask for sympathy or forgiveness. I only want to confess, to open my heart, to show how easily a man can lose his footing. Perhaps you'll judge me, perhaps you'll curse me, but if you listen until the end, maybe you'll understand that what happened to me wasn't born out of lust alone, but also out of loneliness, of longing, of two lives brushing too close in ways they never should have. And so, the story begins on what I thought was the happiest chapter of my life. When my son married, and a young woman's laughter returned to my quiet home. Little did I know, from that very day, fate had already set me on a path I could never have imagined. Life has a way of testing us when we least expect it. For a while, after my son's wedding, our house felt warm again. My daughter-in-law filled the kitchen with laughter, filled the evenings with small talk, and filled the silence my wife had left behind. I told myself this was what peace felt like. This was how family was supposed to be. But then came the day that shattered that illusion. It was late autumn, the air heavy with the scent of rain. My son had been working long shifts, often gone from dawn till night. That evening, he called to say he wouldn't be coming home at all, too much overtime, he said. So it was just me and her, alone in the house. She cooked a simple dinner: rice, soup, stir-fried vegetables. Nothing special. Yet when she placed the bowl in front of me, her eyes lingered on mine a second too long. It unsettled me, though I pretended not to notice. We ate mostly in silence, save for the sound of rain tapping against the window. After dinner, I went to sit on the porch. The rain had turned into a storm, the kind that shakes the roof and makes the trees groan. I thought I would be alone with my cigarette, but soon I heard footsteps. She came out, holding an umbrella in one hand, a cup of warm ginger tea in the other. "You'll catch cold out here," she said softly, handing me the cup. Her fingers brushed mine. That single touch burned more than the tea's heat. I pulled back quickly, muttering thanks, trying to steady my voice. She didn't move away, though. Instead, she sat down beside me, close enough that our shoulders nearly touched. For a long while, we just sat there, listening to the storm. My mind screamed at me, "Get up. Go inside. End this before it begins." But my body betrayed me. I stayed, sipping the tea, pretending to watch the rain while every nerve in me was tuned to her presence. Then, out of nowhere, she whispered, "Dad, do you ever feel lonely?" The words cut straight into me. I almost dropped the cup. What was I supposed to say? That every night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wishing for a voice beside me? That the silence of this house gnawed at my bones? That yes, I was lonely, so lonely it ached? But I didn't say any of that. I just cleared my throat and mumbled, "Everyone feels lonely sometimes." She turned then, looking at me, her eyes shimmering with something I didn't dare name. "Me too," she whispered. That was the moment everything changed. From that night on, I couldn't look at her the same way. I tried. Lord knows I tried. But the memory of her voice, her eyes in the storm's dim light, it followed me like a shadow. And she began to seek me out more often. Small things, innocent on the surface. Bringing me tea before bed. Sitting beside me when the television was on, asking about my day, listening with a tenderness that felt almost dangerous. One afternoon, I came home early. My son was still at work. She was in the kitchen, struggling with a broken jar, glass scattered across the floor, and she cut her hand. Without thinking, I rushed over, grabbed her wrist, pressed a towel against the wound. Blood stained the fabric, warm against my fingers. Her face was inches from mine. I could smell her hair, her skin. She winced, then gave a faint smile. "You always take care of me," she said. Something inside me cracked. I wanted to pull away, to tell her not to say things like that. But instead, I held her hand a second too long. A silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. When I finally let go, I felt as though I had crossed an invisible line even if no words had been spoken. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, replaying the scene, the warmth of her hand, the look in her eyes, the way her voice trembled. Guilt gnawed at me, but alongside it, something else stirred, a hunger I hadn't felt in years. And then came the incident that sealed it all. One weekend, my son had to leave town for work. He packed a bag and left early in the morning. I told myself I'd keep busy, fix the fence, clean the shed, anything to keep my mind straight. But by evening, as the house grew quiet, I felt the weight of her presence again. I was in my room, reading the newspaper, when I heard a knock. The door creaked open, and she stepped in, holding a tray. On it, a bowl of soup. "You skipped dinner," she said gently. "I thought you might be hungry." I tried to refuse. My voice was sharp, harsher than I meant it to be. "You shouldn't trouble yourself. Leave it on the table." But she didn't leave. She set the tray down, then sat at the edge of my bed. My chest tightened. I wanted to tell her to go, but my words stuck in my throat. She looked at me for a long moment, then asked quietly, "Do you ever wonder what life would be like if things were different?" I froze. Every muscle in me tensed. I should have said no. I should have ended it right there. But when I met her eyes, I saw longing. Real, raw longing. And for the first time, I couldn't pretend anymore. I didn't answer her question. I just sat there, torn apart inside, while the unspoken truth hung heavy in the room. That was the night I realized. My daughter-in-law didn't just see me as her father-in-law. And God help me, I no longer saw her as just my son's wife. After that night, nothing between us felt the same. We still carried on the roles of father-in-law and daughter-in-law, still moved about the house as though life was normal. But beneath the surface, there was a current, a silent, dangerous pull neither of us dared to name. She would smile at me across the dinner table, her eyes lingering half a heartbeat too long. I would hear her footsteps in the hallway at night and feel my pulse quicken, even if she never came to my door. Every small gesture seemed loaded with meaning. The way she set down my cup of tea, the way she brushed past me in the narrow kitchen, the way her hand sometimes grazed mine when passing me a plate. I told myself it was all in my head, that she was just kind, attentive, the way any dutiful daughter-in-law would be. But deep down, I knew better. And worse, I knew she knew too. One evening, my son came home later than usual. We had eaten already, just the two of us. After clearing the dishes, she walked into the living room where I sat, flipping through channels on the old television. Without a word, she sank into the seat beside me. For a few minutes, we just watched the screen, though neither of us really paid attention. The space between us felt electric, too charged. Then she leaned slightly closer and whispered, "I like sitting here with you. It feels safe." Those words struck me like a hammer. I nearly stood up to escape, but I stayed rooted in place, my heart thundering. I didn't reply. I couldn't. But in the silence that followed, everything was said. From that point on, our encounters grew riskier. She no longer avoided the brush of a hand or the closeness of a shared task. Sometimes, when my son was in another room, she'd glance at me with a smile that carried a secret only we shared. And I, weak fool that I was, didn't stop her. The house itself seemed to conspire against me. One night, while I fixed a leak under the sink, she crouched beside me, holding the flashlight. Our shoulders touched, and neither of us moved away. The scent of her hair filled my lungs, dizzying me. My hand slipped, and the wrench clattered to the floor. She laughed softly, leaned closer, and for a moment I thought, God help me. I thought she might kiss me. I pulled back just in time, mumbling something about the pipe. But the look in her eyes told me she had felt it too. The next day, I tried to put distance between us. I spent more hours outside, tinkering in the yard, visiting neighbors, doing anything to avoid being alone with her. But she sought me out still, bringing me water while I worked, standing in the doorway just to ask if I needed anything. Every word, every gesture, felt like a thread, pulling me tighter into a net I couldn't break. I began drinking more at night, a glass of rice wine, then two, then more. I told myself it would numb me, keep me from thinking of her, but the alcohol only loosened the chains I tried to bind myself with. In those blurred hours, my mind would drift back to her smile, her touch, her whisper. It feels safe. One particularly stormy night, I sat outside with a bottle, rain pounding the roof. She found me there, shivering, and without a word, draped a blanket over my shoulders. "You'll get sick," she scolded gently, her voice low, almost trembling. I looked up at her, rainlight catching the sadness in her eyes. For the first time, I saw not just a young wife, but a woman, lonely, vulnerable, aching for something unspoken. And I realized with horror that she was as caught in this as I was. "Why do you do this?" I asked, my voice thick from drink. She paused, then whispered, "Because you see me." He doesn't. The world spun. My son, her husband, worked tirelessly, but perhaps too tirelessly. He left her alone too often, neglected the small tendernesses a woman craves, and in that void, I had stepped in not as a father-in-law, but as a man. That night, I lay awake, guilt clawing at me, yet unable to banish the warmth of her words. She needed me, and against my better judgment, I realized I needed her too. The tension between us only deepened. We didn't cross the line, not yet. But the line grew thinner by the day. One afternoon, while my son was away, she stood in the kitchen slicing fruit. I walked in, meaning only to grab a glass of water. She looked up, smiled faintly, then held out a piece of apple. "Try it," she said. I hesitated, but she raised her hand, offering it directly to my lips. My heart raced as I leaned forward and took the bite. Her fingers brushed my mouth intentionally, unmistakably. Neither of us spoke. But in that silence, something irreversible happened. From then on, every glance, every word between us carried weight. The house was no longer a safe haven but a stage where a dangerous drama unfolded in secret. We were two people bound by family, yet drawn together by something far more treacherous. I prayed for strength, for distance, for an end to this madness. But with every prayer came the memory of her hand, her eyes, her whispered confession, and I knew, deep in my bones, that we were heading toward a cliff we could no longer avoid. The storm I had feared finally arrived. It didn't come with thunder or lightning, it came quietly, in a moment so ordinary it almost slipped past unnoticed. But once it happened, nothing could ever be the same. It was a Saturday evening. My son had called earlier to say he would be late again, caught up in work. I was in the living room, half watching the news, when she came in carrying a tray with sliced fruit. "You should eat something," she said. Her tone was gentle, almost too gentle. She set the tray down and sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her body. The television droned on, but I couldn't hear it. My heart thudded so loud it drowned everything else. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. Then she turned to me and whispered, "Do you know how many times I've wanted to talk to you, but couldn't?" I froze. "What do you mean?" Her eyes shimmered with tears. "I don't just see you as my husband's father. I can't pretend anymore." The words hung heavy in the air, thicker than the silence that followed. My chest tightened. My breath came shallow. I had imagined this moment, dreaded it, longed for it, and now that it was here, I didn't know what to do. I should have stopped her. I should have said, "This is wrong. We can't." But instead, I just sat there, drowning in her gaze. Then, before I could think, she leaned forward and kissed me. It wasn't long, not more than a few seconds, but it felt like the ground gave way beneath me. When she pulled back, trembling, her eyes searched mine, desperate, terrified. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I shouldn't have, but I silenced her, not with words, but with the truth that had been clawing inside me for months. "You're not the only one," I said, my voice barely audible. In that instant, we both knew. The line we had sworn never to cross was gone. From that night, everything spiraled. We tried to keep it contained, furtive glances, fleeting touches when no one was watching, whispered words in the shadows. But desire is like fire. Once lit, it spreads faster than you can contain it. One afternoon, while my son was at work, she came into my room. Her hands trembled, her breath quickened, but she didn't turn back. "I can't hold it in anymore," she said. I should have pushed her away. Instead, I let my arms wrap around her, and for the first time, we gave in to everything we had been denying. When it was over, we sat in silence, both terrified, both overwhelmed. She cried softly, hiding her face in her hands. I held her, guilt gnawing at me even as I whispered words of comfort. From that day on, every stolen moment carried equal parts sweetness and poison. We lived in fear of being discovered. Yet we couldn't stop, and then came the night that nearly destroyed us. My son came home earlier than expected. I had been in the kitchen with her, close enough that one more second would have betrayed us. At the sound of his footsteps, we sprang apart, masks snapping back into place. My heart pounded as he walked in, smiling, oblivious. But in his eyes, I thought I saw suspicion, just a flicker, a question unasked. "What were you two talking about?" he asked casually. "Dinner," she replied quickly. Too quickly. He seemed satisfied, but I wasn't. That night, lying awake, I realized how close we had come to ruin. One slip, one wrong move, and everything would come crashing down. The weight of it pressed on me, suffocating. I began avoiding her, pulling back, trying to build walls where none had been before. She noticed, of course. One evening, she cornered me in the hallway, her eyes red. "Why are you pushing me away?" she demanded. "Because this will destroy us," I whispered harshly. "It will destroy him. Don't you see?" Tears streamed down her face. "But what about me? What about us? Do you think I can just go back to pretending?" Her pain cut me deeper than any blade. I wanted to hold her, to promise her something, anything. But the image of my son, his trust, his laughter, his love rose before me. And I couldn't. The days that followed were hell. She grew distant, her smiles forced, her eyes heavy with sorrow. My son, oblivious, would put an arm around her, and I'd see her stiffen, holding back tears. Every moment was a dagger to my chest. The climax of it all came one night when she slipped into my room, her face pale, her voice trembling. "I can't live like this anymore," she said. "I love you, and I don't care what happens." I felt my world shatter. I wanted her, God knows I wanted her, but I couldn't let her throw her life away, couldn't let my son's world collapse. So I did the only thing I could. I pushed her away. "Hard. You have to stop," I said, my voice breaking. "This ends here. No more." She stared at me, stunned, betrayed. Then she whispered, "You'll regret this," and fled, leaving me alone in the darkness. That night, I sat with my head in my hands, drowning in guilt and longing. I had broken her heart, and in doing so, shattered my own. But I knew there was no other way, and yet, even as I tried to sever the bond, I knew it wasn't over. Not really. The fire we had lit couldn't be extinguished so easily. It burned still, hidden beneath the ashes, waiting for a spark. From the night I pushed her away, I lived in constant dread. Every glance from my son felt like suspicion, every word from her like an accusation. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. My heart was always racing, as though the truth might burst out at any moment. I tried to create distance. I left the house more often, finding excuses to visit neighbors, to work longer hours in the garden, to linger in the marketplace, even when I had nothing to buy, anything to avoid being alone with her. But avoiding her didn't erase her. Every time I caught a glimpse of her in the kitchen, or heard her laugh faintly from the other room, the ache inside me returned. Loneliness had once been my burden, but now it was longing for what I knew I could never have. She noticed my withdrawal. Of course she did. One night, she found me on the porch, staring at the dark yard. Her voice trembled as she asked, "Do you regret it?" I couldn't answer. How could I? Regret didn't even begin to describe what I carried. I regretted giving in. I regretted pushing her away. I regretted everything. And yet, I also couldn't deny the truth. I had loved her, and a part of me still did, so I said nothing. I just stood, turned away, leaving her with tears streaking down her face. That sight has haunted me ever since. After that, we drifted further apart. She became quieter, her smiles brittle, her laughter fading. My son didn't notice, too consumed by work, too blind to the storm raging in his own home, and maybe that was a blessing. If he had seen the truth in our eyes, our family would have crumbled that very instant. I thought keeping distance would ease the pain. Instead, it only deepened it. Every night I sat alone, drinking until my vision blurred, replaying the stolen moments we had shared, the warmth of her hand, the whisper of her voice, the way she once looked at me with raw longing. I told myself it was over, that I had ended it, but the truth was, it lived on inside me, more alive than ever. One evening, she came into my room again. My son was late at work. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen from crying. She stood by the door for a long moment before whispering, "I can't pretend anymore. I can't carry this alone." I nearly broke. Every fiber in me wanted to take her in my arms, to promise her something beyond this pain. But I couldn't. I forced the words out, bitter as poison. "If we go on, everything will collapse. Do you understand? This family will be ruined." Her tears fell silently. She nodded once, then left, closing the door gently behind her. I sat there all night, staring at that closed door, knowing I had chosen the right thing, yet feeling as though I had destroyed us both. Since then, we've lived like strangers. In front of my son, we play our roles flawlessly. She, the dutiful wife, I, the steady father. But beneath the surface, the truth still pulses like a hidden wound. Sometimes I wonder, if I had been stronger from the start, if I had never allowed even a glance, a touch, a whisper, would we be free of this torment? But life doesn't give us second chances. Once a line is crossed, the mark remains forever. Now, when I sit alone at night, I think of her. I think of how she cared for me when I was sick, how she smiled at my jokes, how she whispered that she felt seen. Those memories cut deeper than any knife. Sweet, yes, but unbearably bitter. And the cruelest part? I can never share this with anyone. I must carry it to my grave. Outwardly, I'll remain the loyal father, the quiet old man. Inwardly, I'll always be the man who lost himself to something forbidden, something unforgettable. Sometimes, I look at my son, his laughter, his pride, and my heart twists. He doesn't know. He must never know. To him, his wife is faithful, his father is honorable. I must protect that illusion, even if it kills me inside. So I live with the silence, with the memories, with the endless question that gnaws at me. Was it love? Or just loneliness dressed as love? I don't know. I may never know. But this I do know. If anyone asked me whether I regret it, I would say yes. Regret so heavy it crushes me every day. And yet, if anyone asked whether I could forget it, I would say no. Never. That is the tragedy I carry, a love that should never have been, a secret that will burn in my chest until my last breath. And when I die, perhaps only then will it finally be buried. Until then, I walk this tightrope of silence, day after day, knowing that one wrong step could destroy us all. And so my story ends here. Not with resolution, not with peace, but with a question left hanging in the air. Will the truth ever come to light, or will it remain forever hidden, known only to me and to her? I can't answer that. All I can do is live each day with the weight of it pressing on my soul, praying it never breaks free.